What if one man's ambition could reshape the course of world history, ignite a global conflict, and leave a legacy of devastation that still haunts the modern world? Welcome to our channel, where we dive deep into the people, events, and ideologies that changed everything. Today, we uncover the chilling rise and catastrophic downfall of Adolf Hitler, the dictator who led Nazi Germany through one of history's darkest chapters. Get ready for a powerful exploration of his life, from his troubled youth to the end of the Third Reich. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment of history brought to life. 1. Early life and artistic dreams. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, Austria, to a strict father and a deeply devoted mother. His early years were marked by frequent relocations, a turbulent home life, and inconsistent academic performance. Despite showing some aptitude in primary school, Hitler became a rebellious student in his teens. He dreamed of becoming a renowned artist and twice applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, only to be rejected both times. These failures fueled a growing bitterness and deepened his isolation from society. Living in Vienna as a young man, Hitler struggled with poverty, homelessness, and resentment toward those who succeeded where he had failed. It was during this time that his worldview began to shift. He became increasingly influenced by nationalist rhetoric and anti-Semitic ideas. These years played a critical role in forming the ideological foundation that would later define his leadership. His disillusionment with modern art and culture, along with his hatred for the multicultural nature of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, festered into rage. Rather than finding beauty in art, he found power in politics. And so, from the ashes of artistic rejection, a political fire began to burn inside the young Hitler. 2. Soldier in the Great War. When World War I erupted in 1914, Hitler saw an opportunity to serve a greater cause. He enlisted in the German army and served on the Western Front with the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment. As a messenger, he delivered important orders across deadly battlefields, surviving gas attacks and enemy fire. He was wounded twice and awarded the Iron Cross for bravery, a distinction he wore proudly for the rest of his life. The war gave his life structure, purpose, and a sense of belonging he never felt before. But it also deepened his hatred for those he believed betrayed Germany. When the German Empire collapsed and surrendered in 1918, Hitler, recovering from a gas attack in a hospital, was devastated. He viewed the armistice as a humiliating betrayal, blaming Jews, communists, and politicians for Germany's defeat. This sense of injustice fueled his radicalization. The trenches of the Great War hardened him, both emotionally and ideologically. His wartime experiences became the bedrock for his belief in struggle, sacrifice, and ruthless nationalism. After the war, Hitler didn't return to painting or civilian life. Instead, he found a new battleground, the world of politics. And with that, a soldier's fury became a dictator's resolve. 3. Entry into politics and the birth of the Nazi Party. After the war, Hitler found himself in Munich, jobless, aimless, and angry. It was there that he joined the German Workers' Party, a small nationalist group that soon became the National Socialist German Workers' Party, known to the world as the Nazi Party. Hitler's oratory skills were unmatched. He could channel the pain and frustration of post-war Germans into passionate speeches that electrified his audience. As Germany grappled with political chaos and economic collapse, Hitler promised a return to glory. He railed against the Treaty of Versailles, which had crippled the nation economically and militarily. He blamed Jews and Marxists for Germany's downfall and proposed a purified, powerful nation led by a single, unshakable leader. By 1921, Hitler had seized control of the Nazi Party. He crafted a potent propaganda machine, complete with symbols, uniforms, and fiery rhetoric. The party's platform was built on nationalism, anti-Semitism, anti-communism, and authoritarianism. Hitler understood the power of spectacle rallies, flags, marches, and salutes, all designed to evoke unity and dominance. What started as a fringe group had become a rising political force. With Hitler at the helm, the Nazi movement was no longer just an ideology, it was a crusade. 4. The failed beer hall putsch. In 1923, inspired by Mussolini's march on Rome, Hitler attempted his own coup, the beer hall putsch in Munich. Believing that the time was right to seize power, Hitler and his stormtroopers stormed a political meeting and tried to overthrow the Bavarian government. The plan quickly unraveled. Police opened fire, killing several Nazis and wounding Hitler. He was arrested and charged with treason. What could have ended his career instead turned him into a national figure. During his trial, Hitler used the courtroom as a stage, delivering fiery speeches that were widely reported in the press. He portrayed himself as a patriot trying to save Germany, and many Germans admired his passion. Though convicted, he was given a lenient sentence and served only 9 months in prison. It was during this time that he wrote main Kampf part autobiography, part political manifesto. In it, he laid out his vision for Germany's future: racial purity, expansion eastward, and dictatorship under a single, heroic leader. The failed putsch taught him an important lesson. Power would not be taken by force, but through manipulation of the democratic system. Hitler would now wear a suit instead of a uniform, but his mission remained the same: total control. 5. Rise to Chancellor and the fall of democracy. By the early 1930s, Germany was drowning in economic depression, mass unemployment, and political instability. The Weimar Republic was faltering, and desperate citizens turned to extremist parties for solutions. The Nazi Party gained momentum in national elections, becoming the second largest in 1930 and the largest by 1932. Despite losing the presidential election to Hindenburg, Hitler was seen as the only leader who could restore order. On January 30, 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Within weeks, he exploited the Reichstag fire, a suspicious blaze at the German parliament, to convince the government to pass the Reichstag fire decree. This suspended civil liberties, allowing mass arrests of communists and political enemies. He followed this with the Enabling Act, which gave him dictatorial powers. Democracy was dismantled with terrifying speed. Political parties were outlawed, opposition crushed, and the press muzzled. Hitler now had complete control over the government, and he used it to shape Germany into a one-party totalitarian state. What began as a legal rise through the system ended with the total destruction of that system. Hitler was no longer Chancellor. He was Führerleader of the German Reich. 6. Nazi propaganda and cult of personality. Once in power, Hitler understood the importance of controlling the minds of the people. He built an empire of propaganda, led by Joseph Goebbels, to mold public opinion and glorify his image. Every newspaper, film, radio broadcast, and classroom echoed Nazi ideology. Hitler was portrayed not just as a leader, but as a near-messianic savior of the German nation. Images of him with children, animals, and adoring crowds filled public spaces, carefully curated to evoke warmth and loyalty. The swastika became a symbol of unity and strength, plastered across buildings and uniforms. Hitler's speeches, broadcast nationwide, were theatrical displays of charisma, rage, and national pride. School curriculums were rewritten to teach racial purity and obedience. Art and literature were censored, twisted to serve Nazi ideals. Dissent became not just dangerous, it became unthinkable. The regime created a reality where truth was dictated by the party, and the Führer's word was law. Through relentless repetition and psychological manipulation, Hitler's propaganda machine turned millions of ordinary Germans into devoted followers. In the Nazi state, to love Germany meant to worship Hitler. 7. The persecution of Jews and the road to genocide. From the very beginning, Hitler's worldview was rooted in anti-Semitism, but once in power, hatred became policy. The Nazis passed the Nuremberg Laws in 1935, stripping Jews of citizenship and banning intermarriage with non-Jews. Jewish businesses were boycotted, their rights eroded, and their lives upended. Hitler blamed Jews for Germany's defeat in World War I, its economic woes, and its moral decay. The regime used every tool, laws, media, education to dehumanize them. Violence escalated in 1938 during Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, when synagogues burned and Jewish stores were looted across Germany. Thousands were arrested and sent to concentration camps. But this was only the beginning. With the invasion of Poland and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, millions more Jews came under Nazi control. The final solution was devised a systematic plan to exterminate Europe's Jews. Ghettos turned into death trains. Camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor became factories of death. 6 million Jews were murdered. Hitler's obsession with racial purity led to the most horrific genocide in human history. What began as hateful rhetoric ended in the Holocaust. 8. World War II and global destruction. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, triggering the start of World War II. He had already annexed Austria and the Sudetenland, but this time Britain and France declared war. Using a new military tactic called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, the Nazis overwhelmed Europe with speed and brutality. France fell in 6 weeks. Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and the Netherlands followed. By 1941, Hitler turned his eyes to the Soviet Union, launching Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. Though initially successful, the Eastern Front became a bloody quagmire. Millions perished in brutal combat, starvation, and massacres. In the meantime, Hitler declared war on the United States after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, sealing Germany's fate in a truly global conflict. Nazi forces occupied vast territories, but were stretched thin and plagued by resistance. Hitler's refusal to retreat or accept tactical losses led to devastating defeats. Cities burned, civilians suffered, and the world reeled from the chaos. Hitler had promised a 1,000-year Reich. Instead, he unleashed 6 years of global carnage and bloodshed. Entire cities like Warsaw, Rotterdam, and Dresden were reduced to ashes, while millions of civilians faced famine, forced labor, and mass displacement. The war brought unimaginable suffering, not just on the front lines, but in everyday homes across Europe and beyond. The Pacific Theater, though separate, was deeply influenced by Hitler's alliance with Japan, dragging more nations into chaos. 9. Hitler's inner circle and paranoia. Though Hitler held absolute power, he was increasingly isolated and surrounded by sycophants. His inner circle included figures like Himmler, Goebbels, Göring, and Speer, each vying for favor and influence. Trust was rare. Loyalty was everything. As the war dragged on, Hitler became more erratic and distrustful. He micromanaged military strategies, often ignoring his generals' advice. He believed in fate and intuition over fact. He spent hours secluded in his bunker, growing increasingly detached from reality. Assassination attempts, like the famous July 20 plot by Claus von Stauffenberg, only deepened his paranoia. He purged enemies real and imagined. Even his most loyal allies were not safe. Fear ruled the Nazi regime, not just for the public, but within the leadership itself. Hitler's deteriorating health, erratic decisions, and reliance on delusion turned the final years of the war into a chaotic nightmare. What began as strategic calculation ended in irrational fear. The once dominant Fuhrer was now a prisoner of his own mind, leading a doomed empire into collapse. As the war turned against Germany, loyalty within Hitler's circle became a dangerous game of survival. Himmler secretly tried to negotiate peace with the Allies behind Hitler's back, a betrayal that enraged the Fuhrer. Göring, once his heir apparent, was denounced and stripped of power after suggesting he take control. The bunker became a pressure cooker of fear, suspicion, and collapsing trust. Hitler grew increasingly dependent on unproven miracle weapons and astrologers, grasping at anything to reverse defeat. Even longtime aides were reduced to trembling shadows, afraid to speak candidly. 10. The final days and Hitler's death. By early 1945, Hitler's empire was crumbling. Allied forces closed in from the west, and the Soviet Red Army advanced from the east. Berlin was encircled, reduced to rubble by constant bombing and street fighting. Inside the Fuhrer bunker, deep beneath the city, Hitler spent his final days issuing impossible orders and railing against betrayal. He married his longtime companion, Eva Braun, in a brief ceremony before they both committed suicide on April 30, 1945. Their bodies were burned to prevent display by the Soviets. With his death, the Nazi regime effectively ended. Germany surrendered a week later, on May 8, 1945. The world emerged from the ashes of war forever changed. Hitler's legacy was one of destruction, hatred, and unimaginable cruelty. Millions had died, cities had fallen, and the human soul bore deep scars. Yet even in death, Hitler's story remained a chilling reminder of how one man's ideology, left unchecked, could plunge the world into darkness. The bunker was silent, but history would never forget. Even as Soviet shells pounded the city above, Hitler clung to the illusion of a German victory that would never come. He ranted about betrayal by his generals, blaming them for defeats caused by his own decisions. Food supplies dwindled in the bunker, morale plummeted, and despair filled every corridor. Some of his closest allies began to flee or take their own lives, realizing the end was near. Hitler dictated his final will and political testament, still consumed by hatred and delusion. He refused to surrender, choosing death over capture. His suicide marked not just the end of his life, but the collapse of the twisted ideology he built. Adolf Hitler's rise and fall stand as one of the most terrifying and pivotal sagas in human history, a stark lesson in how hatred, propaganda, and unchecked ambition can destroy nations and lives. His legacy is not one of greatness, but a warning etched in the memories of generations to come. As we reflect on these dark chapters, may we remember the millions of lives lost and the resilience of those who stood against tyranny. If you found this deep dive into history eye-opening, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories from the past that still echo today. Hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to tap the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and never stop learning from history.